Another story. Apparently, it has to deal with the Green New Deal. So, what's going on, Paul?
So this is interesting. We talk about the formation of the Green New Deal. That's
sounds very similar to Jill Stein's Green New Deal.
It is. It came out before Jill Stein. I forget it. It started making its way through sort of think tank circles, I want to say in the 90s. But yeah, it was kind of a pillar of the Jill Stein candidacy, both in 2012 and in 2016. And it basically is talking about, you know, a new deal, sort of an FDR style new deal, but specifically focused around green energies, renewables, and basically a climate economy. But with with the Green New Deal, which is AOC's sort of big thing, it's actually she talked about, you know, they were talking about, well, how are we going to phrase it? Are we going to call it the Green New Deal? And it just sort of organically, that's the way people were talking about that policy. People were talking about, oh, a push to move away from fossil fuels, a push to move toward renewables in a period of time and create jobs in that way. People were talking about that as the Green New Deal. So they just used that saying rather than try to switch things up. Right. So the Green New Deal sort of politicians were able to get a committee. It's basically the Green New Deal committee. Now, one of the things that's sort of frustrating about it is about half the people that ended up on the committee actually take money from the fossil fuel industry and are not sort of in that group of new progressive-minded, you know, democratic socialist freshman Congress people. So Representative Bobby Rush, who's from Illinois' first district, said, and he's on the Energy and Commerce Committee, is basically a little bit miffed that this new Green New Deal committee was trying to get any kind of teeth, because he's like, I'm not going to have them take any of the power away from the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is essentially entirely made up of Democrats who get money from the fossil fuel and energy industries.
Well, how are they going to pay for their ivory back scratcher?
Yeah, they need those ivory back scratchers or unicorn horn back scratcher, whatever that was. Yeah, so here's the really frustrating thing is that this Green New Deal committee essentially has no teeth, or none that I can tell. They don't have subpoena power, so they can't force anyone to come into their committee to answer questions. So it's unlikely that they'll be able to get anyone from the energy industry to answer direct questions to them. And they don't have the power to introduce legislation. Now, they could draft legislation and people could co-sponsor it, but to me it sounds like it's a committee where a bunch of people meet and talk about stuff and have no power to do anything, which is super duper frustrating. That's what we elected these people to do, and we've got people like Bobby Rush and Frank Pallone going around going, oh, thank God they can't do anything. Oh, what would we do if they could actually try to, you know, get renewable energies and jobs for people and try to not destroy the planet with fossil fuels? Oh, thank God we get to keep pumping those fuels out of the ground.
And see, this is where we always talk about how climate change is a serious issue we got to talk about, because let's face it, it's just not establishment Republicans, it's also establishment Democrats that get huge amount of donations from the fossil fuel industry. And, you know, they want to keep the system as is. And the end result is that we're going to be dealing with more environmental disasters, super hurricanes, polar vortex, California, like those droughts we saw impact California, and numerous other environmental disasters that I don't think our infrastructure is truly prepared for. And so long as you have an electoral body, both establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans, getting money from these fossil fuel industries, nothing's ever going to get done. And this Green New Deal committee, I'm surprised that, again, it has no teeth. It's not strong enough to really do anything at this point. I mean, unless there's something else that can be done. Paul?
I'm just looking at this comment from Carbomouth saying his spouse is an oil patch worker, and commented that many of the oil corporations are using solar panels to run their equipment at the oil fields and whatnot. That's really interesting. Yeah. The fact that even oil, natural gas industries are going to be like, well, solar's pretty useful.
And look, and the thing is, I understand a lot of people who work in the fossil fuel industry. No one wants anyone to lose their job. But I mean, I think as a country, we should gradually train people to build green, renewable energy resources and actually create a system that's going to replace it. I mean, it's just not going to be shut over overnight, but creates a system in which we have an industry in place that can replace the previous older one that's out of date.
Right. It's like, we don't want you to lose your job.
Right.
But let's be honest, we probably don't need more chimney sweeps.
Yeah, I mean,
probably don't need more coal miners.
And we
right?
also, and the thing is,
Who wants to learn how wind turbines work?
Yeah, and create more of an advanced infrastructure. I mean, the rest of the international community is moving on without us. So what else is happening with the Green New Deal?
I think this is interesting. So Frank Pallone is arguing here that the fossil fuel industry dollars flowing through the committee won't have any impact on their agenda. So he's one of the people on this Green New Deal committee that doesn't seem like he actually supports a Green New Deal, accepts a lot of money from the fossil fuel industry. And he says that the committee's first hearing will assess the environmental and economic impacts of climate change. And it'll be the first of many hearings on the subject, and pointed out the, quote, stark differences from past Republican House majorities, which refused to hold hearings on climate change and denied they even existed. Great, you can agree it exists. Would you do something about it, or try to, or not applaud the fact that your committee has no teeth at all? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you admit that it exists. Can we do the thing that fixes it, that scientists tell us we have to do in order to, like, not go extinct and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want to not go extinct as a species. Seems good to me.
It seems reasonable at this point. But, I mean, again, with the lack of action from our current system that we have, it's quite clear that we're not going to go anywhere until we get more involvement from the populace. Because until, I guess, these hurricanes and all the other environmental disasters become the eventual new norm, people are not going to still get involved. And it's very important that we get involved now and try and stop it before it becomes too late. I mean, a lot of climate scientists are saying that we reached past the point of no return already. So
yeah, repeatedly, over and over again, estimates in things like sea level rise, or estimates in overall temperature rise, or estimates in CO2 emission levels, or estimates in the amount of, ice that we'll lose from the polar caps, always get exceeded. Like, every single time we revise them and they're like, it's worse than we thought. It's worse than we thought. Again, it's worse than we thought. Again, it's worse. Worse. And it's like, okay, well, if it seems to perpetually be worse than we think, how long do we really have before this accelerates at a rate where it's undeniable and potentially too far gone that we can't do anything about it anymore?
And I'm also looking at the article too right now, to where you're seeing members who are part of the conservative Blue Dog Democratic Party are taking huge corporate donations from a lot of fossil fuel PACs and everything else. So, I mean, they're taking the money from the oil and fossil fuel industry and turning a blind eye to what people want, something to be done about the clear disasters that are waiting for us just around the corner. I mean, if we're not going to create a smart political system that's going to have a green infrastructure, basically we're going to be stuck in stagnation. I don't know, Paul?
Carbon Mouth lives off grid in Alberta, and Captain Jax thinks by 2090 we'll be in an ice age. I'm not a climate scientist, but maybe.
Possibly. I mean, look, a lot of climate scientists are gathering more data as we speak. I mean, this is something we got to see, because apparently environmental patterns are going to reach a point, according to some scientists, they're theorizing that it's going to reach a point where the temperatures on the planet will be at areas before we actually evolved into the hominid species. So, yeah.
I like that every one of these representatives that they ask if they would continue to take fossil fuel money, the answer is either yeah or no comment.
Again, money in politics, it's crippling our democracy. If we don't get money out of politics, we're going to still have a corrupt system. You got to get money out of politics. Citizens United and the McCutcheon decision has systematically created our government to become an oligarchy that only works for the top 1%. So it's one big club, and it doesn't work for us, and there's no way we are invited into it.
Here's a fantastic quote.
Go ahead.
Quote, politicians making climate policy should not be taking money from the lobbyists and executives who have spent the past decades deceiving the public about the science and doing everything they can to protect their bottom lines, even when that means imperiling the entire planet, said Hanlon, the Sunrise Movement spokesperson. Any politician who wants the votes of young people in 2020 needs to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge and back a Green New Deal. If Frank Pallone is serious about taking action on climate, he will use his chairmanship to put forward a vision for a Green New Deal in line with what science and justice demands. That's a good quote right there.